I'm Walt Thiessen, the Crypto Skeptic. Let's talk crypto. And this is becoming a very fun additional little segment here on the LOA Today podcast. So those of you who are checking it out because of the cryptocurrency topic that we've been addressing the last few times, welcome. Glad to have you. I also have a little bit of information to pass along. This is actually the fourth episode. I think it's the third episode of Crypto Skeptic that we've done. The first one was with a woman named Ann Casey. Those who tuned into that one will remember that I promised I would check out her system. Joe, she's actually a currency trader, and she was offering a system for people interested in that. So I tried out her system, and I can tell you, I promised you I would get back to you with my results, so to speak. And my recommendation is do not do it. Absolutely do not do it. Gotcha. I didn't spend any money on it. It was all paper trading and trying things out and so forth. But all of the science that's behind it is a lot more like tea leaves than science. So there's my reading on that one.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But it actually did lead to something kind of interesting that I'm following up on. And I have no idea if I've never looked at Forex or any of the the major trading platforms as something serious to pursue. But I got kind of curious because of this experience, and I started doing a little searching around, and I found a couple things that really caught my attention, including a platform for people who like doing chart trading and so forth, where you can actually do some pretty serious programming to kind of, test things out. Like, okay, so here's a scenario, play out the scenario and have the program do it. And it goes bang, 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 bang. And all of a sudden you have your results. So it's not like having to follow charts for a few months to find out what works. You get bang, you get instant results on it. So I've been playing around with that. And I don't have any results to report yet one way or another, but I'll tell you, it looks promising. So we shall see what happens.
That's awesome. Yeah. The scripting stuff is amazing. You can put scripts in there. And some of that stuff, I'm with you. I don't really touch that stuff. No.
Well, I know that I don't want to get burned, and so
right.
I make sure that I'm not burned. But by the same token, like I said, this is LOA Today. We on the regular podcast we talk about law of attraction, and this was a pure law of attraction thing. I was focusing on something related to it, and it took me over here. So I said, okay, follow it, see where it goes. Maybe it goes nowhere. Who knows? You won't know until you find out. But
exactly.
I'm finding out. Yeah. So anyway, my guest today is Joe Rotella, who is the host of the Crypto 101 show, which is a podcast, a very highly rated top 5% podcast on the subject of cryptocurrency. And when I reached out to him to join me for this segment of LOA Today, the Crypto Skeptic segment, he instantly said yes. And the only thing we had to do was get the calendar right. And here we are. We got the calendar right. So Joe, first of all, thank you for saying yes, because this is great. And we're going to have some fun today. Because you're an advocate. I'm skeptical about the currency side. I love the other side of it, where they're figuring out ways to share data and all that kind of stuff. That's cool. I like that part. It's the currency side that I have my doubts about. But this is going to be fun. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And I am as much of a skeptic, I think, as you are. It's just a different perspective, so to speak. But I'm excited we'll find out to do this, and I think this will be a lot of fun. And I'm going to enjoy talking to you. So
I think it's going to be great. So, all right, well, let's kind of do point counterpoint here for a moment here. Sure. So we're going to let you do points. So give us the pro cryptocurrency argument the way you see it.
From my well, and this is the thing, I have to preface it. On my podcast, I don't really give my opinion on stuff. It's mostly just like, this is what it is. They're short burst segments, 10 minutes at the most. And it's basically just, this is what you need to know.
Okay.
As far as with cryptocurrency, the thing I'm seeing out of this is, so we had Web 1, which was read only. Mm-hmm. We had Web 2, which was read write only. Mm-hmm. And we're heading into this Web 3, which is going to be read, write, and own, meaning like you own your data.
Right.
So,
well, at least in theory.
Right. Yeah, you are exactly right about that. Like, this is where I guess, the powers that be, whoever that is, wants to migrate to this. So for me, there's an underlying, it's the blockchain for me that really provides a lot of positivity to what's happening. And cryptocurrency is a side of that standpoint where it can create somewhat, I'm not going to say totally, but somewhat of a financial independence, or accountability for people's personal information or actual like money currency account type thing.
Hmm.
And for me, I'm an old millennial. I'm going to be 41 next month, and my whole life was just based off of like the dollar using banks and stuff. And after getting into, I'm really, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm more of a Bitcoin purist than anything. Like I don't really mess with altcoins, stable coins, anything like that, unless it has a use case to it
Okay.
that's valued, like reading the white papers, trusting the programming behind it, that type of thing.
And by
So
use case, you mean other than as a currency. You mean for
yeah,
various kinds of enterprises, storage formulas, all kinds of stuff like that.
exactly. Like there's some valid use case. I don't mean to go off on a tangent because you asked me a
That's
simplified
fine. Yeah.
question. But like NFTs are a perfect example of a foundation where it starts off as, well, they're stupid images and why would anybody want to invest in it? Totally valid. I totally agree with that. But there's an underlying thing that the NFT can do once it develops, if it develops into this. And it could be useful to take down Ticketmaster, where we're now using NFTs to use as a ticket between, because I'm a musician and an artist. And for me, it's like, how do you eliminate these ticketing fees that are
Uh,
insanely crazy? And there's an actual company that's already doing this.
hmm.
But that's where I mean, like when I say the use cases, there's a positivity for it. If I say this, if it's used correctly, where we don't have um, corruption, so to speak, or like
Hmm.
where, so there's a big if there. But for me, the currency side with Bitcoin, there's a bigger picture where there's a lot of countries that their currency is crud, like
Sure.
Venezuela, all this stuff. They don't have the ability to um, get U.S. American dollars or whatever you want to call it. So
Hmm.
for them, this type of currency helps them kind of get out of that situation where they're not in it
Hmm.
anymore. And again, there's no utopia. I'm not like delusional, like this is going to change. I do think there's some great things about it. It's just it's so early to tell where it will go.
Hmm.
So for me, it's still developing, but I see that as a positive thing because we need to evolve into something. Because what's happening technically in the economy right now is kind of showing that like this is getting insane with 80% of the money that's printed from the or in circulation today was put in the last 2 years. Like that's an astronomical amount of money, and it's now starting to show that like inflation, all this stuff is happening. So for me, it's one of those things where purely Bitcoin even can be used as a good currency as a leeway to possibly changing this whole crypto market and making it evolve into something bigger. And I don't know, but that's kind of where I stand in terms of it all. So that's why
Okay.
I'm glad you had me on. But I'm sometimes just as skeptical as you with some of this stuff.
Well,
So
that's
that's
fair. That's good. That's why we have conversations like this. This is
yes,
fabulous. And you actually introduced a term that we have not talked about on the show yet. So I'm going to ask you to help define it. NFT, which I believe stands for non fungible token.
yeah, non-fungible.
But what exactly is that? I mean, we got to explain so that people understand, or at least can try to understand what that's all about.
So the easiest way, like everybody kind of sits there and says, well, art's like, well, we already can see the Mona Lisa. Why do I need it in a digital format?
Hmm.
These non-fungible tokens, if you're looking at like, I try to tell people like, don't look at it from the images. Look at a bigger picture here. But
No pun intended.
right, right. These NFTs can be utilized with they're encrypted, which means like which blockchain technology is really awesome. And these NFTs are encrypted with this blockchain technology that allows people, it can't be duplicated or replicated only like as in, let's say I'm selling my song. Each one of my like purchases for that is encrypted. So somebody can't take my song and duplicate it over and over and over again, like we used to be able to do with, or you still can if you have like a CD writer. You
Hmm.
can't do that anymore when it comes to an NFT. Once
Hmm.
it's printed or like minted is what they call it. Once it's minted, that's it. Like that's encrypted on the blockchain. It's permanent. So that code is encrypted for whatever image, music, audio file, a ticket for going to see a concert. So those NFTs, those non-fungible tokens, are pretty critical when it comes to that because it's a different way to use currency digitally, but to still get goods and services in a digital format, so to speak. I try to simplify it as best because there's
Yeah.
like so much foundation you kind of need to understand to get the grasp of it before. Because if you tell somebody that, they're just gonna be like, "That sounds stupid." Well, but there's an underlying foundation for why we're going that direction.
I think it's also helpful to distinguish a non-fungible token from a fungible token.
Right.
Because really the difference there is one is actually a money type currency that you go buy and sell stuff with, and the other one is more like a final product. And once it's done, it's done. You don't really sell it again. You don't really transfer it
Yeah.
again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the non-fungible token, that's the one you were talking about. You don't transfer it again. It's just once it's done, it's done. As opposed to a money, which is a fungible token, that's the kind that can just be used over and over again. Like paper money can just go out. You can keep buying stuff and selling stuff and buying stuff and selling stuff.
Correct. And you can, I mean, you technically can resell the the non-fungible token because as long as you have the encryption key that comes with it, you can sell that again on the market. We just, I think there was somebody just tried to sell the first tweet from
Oh, really?
oh my, and he bought it for like millions of dollars. I think it was like 2.9 million, and he couldn't even get like $1,000 for it. So
Oh, wow.
that's the point where like you can resell these things after the fact, but you have to have that encryption key, which is what that blockchain like allows you to do. And blockchain to me is where it's just the bread and butter of it. Like that's a critical part of what we're trying to do in society with like data and like the tech side of things. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, but the non-fungible part of it, you're exactly right. It's a in a digital realm.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
they're all in the digital realm, but it's the currency realm. It's where
yes,
it's money that you use to buy and sell, and then once you sold something and you got that money, you could go buy something else yourself.
right.
It's a currency that actually circulates.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really the difference. So good. Well, I like what you laid out there, and that gives us a good starting point for conversation. I think you're probably right. Just from what I'm hearing, we're probably going to find more to agree on than
Yeah,
disagree on.
definitely.
I'll lay out some of the things I've been concerned about where cryptocurrency is concerned, particularly Bitcoin, because I was actually aware of Bitcoin when it first came out, and there's a piece of me that kicks myself because I didn't bother to mine the thing. I could have when it was cheap to mine, but I didn't. But oh well, you live and learn. No big deal. But the concerns that I had then are still concerns today, and I've listed a number of them in past episodes. I'll touch on a few here briefly. First and foremost, it was supposed to be a global currency by now that everybody was using. 14 years later, it's not, which is not a good sign for a currency. If you're going to be a currency, you're going to be a currency fairly quickly. I mean, yeah, there might be a delay in there, but 14 years. The thing I like to equate it to is all the claims about climate change, where our climate was supposed to have burned up by now over the last 50 years, over and over and over again. And I'm not saying there's nothing there, that there's nothing wrong with the climate. Don't get me wrong on that. I'm just saying that the propositions about how terrible everything was going to get have not come true. And it's
Mhm.
kind of similar here with Bitcoin. Bitcoin was supposed to, like you were talking about, save the world. I mean, you didn't personally believe that, but that was part of what the whole philosophy was. This is like going to save us from the fiat dollar and the terrible governments and the central banks with all the terrible things they're doing. And it hasn't even caught on a big scale where it's actually an everyday currency. So to me, that's like the biggest one. And then the second biggest one is the fact that there are now, I found this out from my last interview. I had no idea there are now 18,000 cryptocurrencies out there. The last number I heard was
Yeah,
11,000. So 18,000 like blew my mind. But there's well over a trillion and a half, I think, invested in it right
it's
now.
yeah.
And we know for a fact that all those cryptocurrencies are not ultimately going to be adopted by the marketplace. I mean, maybe one or two if we're lucky, perhaps 10 if you're a real optimist, but not 18,000, which means there's going to be a whole bunch of people who lose their shirts. And
Yep.
I'm not against people losing their shirts. I mean, that's part of the marketplace. But my point is, when you have millions of people losing their shirts about something that is generically called cryptocurrency, and most people don't know what that is, it's probably not the best marketing ploy to scare the populace out of their pants by hearing about all these people who lost their shirts in cryptocurrency. If you want to get
Mhm.
cryptocurrency addressed, not just addressed, but accepted and adopted by the population at large. So I think that's like probably the biggest obstacle that they have, because I mean, we both know currency is only currency if people believe in and accept that it's currency.
Yep.
And
Utility, scarcity, and you have to have a belief in it.
you gotta
Otherwise,
have a
what's
belief
the
in it.
point? Yeah.
So if you got to have a belief in it, and you got this gigantic mountain of a wall saying, "No, don't believe in this, forget that,"
Yeah.
that's a pretty serious problem going on there. Some of the other things that bothers me a little bit, and this may actually surprise you a little bit. One of the big arguments in favor of Bitcoin is that it's secure, and that the reason that it's secure is because transactions are being basically validated by large numbers of people, so it becomes theoretically impossible for false transactions to enter the system, and people end up having their money stolen and so forth. I worked in IT before I became self-employed in 2002, and the last job that I worked in was for a medium-sized insurance company, and my cubicle was about 10 steps away from the guy who was the head of internet security for the company. And we used to have conversations all the time. We didn't actually work in the same area. I was doing servers, he was doing IS, so it was kind of a different thing. But we used to chat about all kinds of stuff. And I remember very distinctly, I don't remember the exact wording, but I remember very distinctly one conversation where he said to me, "You know what the biggest risk in internet security is?" I said, "No, what?" He says, "It's when there's a software manufacturer who is absolutely convinced his software is impregnable." Because that is the where all the guys who are trying to hack and crack this stuff are going to
Yeah.
go after, because they're just all of a sudden they're lax. It's like, well, hey, we're safe, no big deal here. And I like to point out, they don't actually have to get a transaction in there permanently in the blockchain. All they got to do is get in there just long enough to extract asset, trade it for something else, and disappear. It doesn't have to be permanent. And when we add in the fact that it's a decentralized currency, well, that means there are benefits to that, certainly. But one of the disadvantages is there's no authority you can run to and say, "Hey, my Bitcoin got stolen. What do I do?" And by that time they're gone.
Yeah. There's no
So
FDIC to
yeah, there's
regulate,
nothing
or
like
yeah.
that. I mean, you might be able to go to the cops, but they probably wouldn't understand what it was anyway. So what good would it do you?
Yeah, and unless it's involving like massive amounts of funding, like we're talking like drug, which there was Chainalysis did a I think it was in 2021 they came out, and in terms of cryptocurrency as a whole, because this is a number that always gets skewed too. Like everybody always sits there and says like there's so much fraud that happens with cryptocurrency, and they get confused that like there's a difference between people being dumb and investing in dumb coins like a Dogecoin and getting their
Mm,
money ripped off
hmm.
versus like actually getting like money laundering type stuff happen. Like they
Sure.
there's a disconnect, and I'm not saying that like stuff doesn't happen. But Chainalysis did an actual investigation on it, and they came out with like I think it was under 1% of cryptocurrency was used for fraud in terms of like that type of thing, like money laundering, anything. And in terms of the black market, most criminals don't want to use it because it's too difficult for them to understand. So it still revolves around the dollar. And again, I'm not sitting here saying like we need to give it's not about that. It's more just like I, especially with my audience, it's like I don't care if people don't agree, don't, it's not about disagreeing. It's like what are the data and statistics and the facts behind it? Because then once we see that, we can get a better understanding of, okay, is it just a small percentage of the fraud? And is it just because some traders are dumb, like you said, and they don't know what they're kind of doing, so they put all this money into it and then they get ripped off because they don't read a white paper? And it's like, well, like you said, it's decentralized. You need to like really pay attention to stuff. And if you're not going to, and you get ripped off, that's the accountability side. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No,
um,
well, you're making my points. I feel like. I mean, I agree with you.
no, but that's where I always try to tell people, because even in my family, there's people in my family and friends that like they think I drink a Kool-Aid, and it's like it's not about that. I have a 10-year-old daughter. I personally believe that where we're going with all this stuff, their generation is going to be the ones that like are on the front end of this stuff. And for me,
Totally.
it's like I would rather know it now than be like a decade or whatever behind and having to like catch up with what is happening here. Um, and I think that's for me where it's like teaching people to not, and I'm not, again, I'm not sitting here proclaiming I'm a great teacher, but like just to critically think like a bigger picture perspective of it to understand it. But anyway, I just, it frustrates me sometimes because people will take a small portion of things and they'll blanket statement over the whole perspective of it. And it's like, okay, well, let's take a step back and take a
Hmm.
look. But I do agree with you on a lot of your points where it's like, especially like altcoins, like the fact that there's 18,000 coins out there and half those use cases are like not good. Like,
Not good.
and
Very diplomatically said, I must say.
well, like I just released a podcast episode today about the whole market meltdown with the cryptocurrency, and I only took a portion of it, and it was about stable coins, and it was basically like they're supposed to be pegged to a dollar, but that's not what happened.
Hmm.
So again, it just is that same thing where I don't venture into that because I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Like if you're going to trade cryptocurrency and you're going to use it like a dollar, so to speak, why wouldn't you just use a dollar? like like logic, you know? And I get that they're trying to avoid taxes. They're trying to so they keep it in the crypto ecosystem
Hmm.
so that they don't have to trade it out and put it back in a bank just to make it, and it's faster for them to trade. But at the same time, they're putting it into a stable coin that wouldn't even release where their reserve money was at to back up the stable coins. And I'm not, I'm trying to get like lower it down so people understand it, but it's stuff like that that like, I don't drink Kool-Aid. It's more like, what's the bigger picture here? And I wish more people would do that because maybe we'd have better dialogue of understanding like, okay, this is how the function of it works and it's changing into this direction or whatever. But anyway, I'm
Well,
rambling. I'm
well,
sorry.
that's right. But of course, I think what you're touching on here is actually useful information because really, for the average person out there, they don't. Not only do they have no interest in learning about all this stuff, they don't have time to learn all this stuff. They don't have to learn about the dollar in order to use the dollar. They don't have to learn about
They
the
don't.
euro to use the dollar. The euro. They just go, okay, here's my money, go. It's that simple. So anytime that we're talking about having to learn about something in order to adopt it, to me, that's just one more hurdle to overcome, one more thing to make it more and more difficult for what should we call it, widespread global acceptance to
Yeah.
take place, and which is without that, none of them work. Without that as currencies, now certainly there are the other sides, the very useful forms of technology usage that can be applied to a wide range of things, and we're going to see really cool stuff coming out of that. But on the currency side, on just treating cryptocurrency
Yeah.
as money, that this is why I don't think any of it's going to take place. I don't even think Bitcoin's going to make it. I think they're all going to end up failing in the long run as currencies. Now, one of my guests recently pointed out something that I thought had some validity to it. I can't say I like it a whole lot, but it has some validity to it, which is he suggested that the cryptocurrencies that do make it are going to be issued by central banks. And you know what? There's some possibility there. I could see that coming off. I'm not sure it's a good idea, but I could see that happening. But I'm curious to
See,
know what you think about that.
well, that's where, and I'm not, that's where they mistake cryptocurrency. So there's a difference because all cryptocurrency is decentralized. So if a digital coin comes out from a centralized bank, then it's not a cryptocurrency. If
So
they're
okay, we're
saying
going to define it as it has to be decentralized in order to be called a cryptocurrency.
right, because it's got to be decentralized to be a cryptocurrency. Because a lot of the times, like a lot of people ask me about the federal government coming, well, they're coming out with their own crypto coin. It's like it's not a crypto coin, it's a digital coin. And don't we already kind of have that? And the other perspective of that, like the Fed is so delayed, like
Yeah.
they don't even understand. Like when we talk like American politics and government, like they are so slow to come into the process of this stuff that it's like that's another like 5 to 10 years away before they even get into the dialogue of having this conversation about it. But to talk back to your point, I like China's already got they already have a central bank coin.
Oh yeah.
But it's a digital coin. It's not a
Hmm.
crypto coin. And so many people confuse that. I don't get mad about it, but it's like, well, we got to call it what it is because cryptocurrency is decentralized as like on blockchain technology. Those central banks, sure, they might be running blockchain, but it's not. They're the ledgers still. They're the ones that are producing it. So there's always a central entity. So that's why it's not a crypto. It's not decentralized.
I appreciate your point, but I really doubt very much that the public is going to discern the difference. And I think that the
No,
central
you're right
banks are going
about
to take it.
that.
They're going to take advantage of it, and ultimately, crypto is going to become whatever kind of coin, whether it's decentralized or not. I think the decentralized elements kind of fall by the wayside. Kind of like what the word hacker did. I mean, the word hacker originally was about somebody who was learning how to take a computer apart so they could understand it, figure it out, try to understand how to make it better. What could he do with it, and so forth. He was basically working for good. And then over time, it turned into somebody who was a malware distributor or a ransomware distributor or something like that. Completely different word. Not at all what the original hackers were all about, but that's what it means today. I think the same thing will happen with cryptocurrency, actually.
That's a valid point though. With coming to like the difference between the two, I think it's just differentiating the point of when people think of crypto, and again, you're right. They probably could use a play on words, but the other side of that coin is there's a lot of people losing faith in establishment, especially in
Yes.
America, and that's where I think it could potentially, like you said, do that. For me, it's like I don't know the younger generations and having people in my life that are part of the younger generation, they don't want all this. Like they're tired of all that like user information being sent. Like we
Sure.
see it all the time with Apple. Apple gets hacked like with their the cloud and stuff. So
Hmm.
I think younger youth generations may adapt it quicker just because they're in a system now that's like it's archaic. Like we're still seeing stuff that's like, why is this still run this slow, especially in government when it's like, holy cow, like we should be moving more towards something that moves a little faster than what we're doing and can keep track of certain things better. But you might be right too. I don't like that's the hard part. It's like,
I agree with you. I think that is the hard part. I've actually been trying to figure this out for a few years now because I have a very strong sense that the way we think about money now, whether crypto or regular euro, dollar, whatever, is not going to be the way we think about money 10, 15 years from now. The thing I can't wrap my head around exactly is, well, how are we going to be thinking about it?
yeah, I
I,
know.
I, I don't have a clear answer on that one yet. I have a feeling it's going to be something of a hybrid, but I can't give you a better piece of information than that.
That's the weird thing about Web 3.0. It's just slowly getting there, and we just don't know enough to like.
Right.
It's kind of scary because we see big tech, how much they manipulate information and use information to do shady stuff with. And now it's going to be interesting because it's like, where is this going to evolve with currency, with all of this stuff? This technology is it's going to get interesting for sure.
Well, you kind of touched on it really nicely a moment ago, and I don't remember what exact phrasing you used, but the gist of it was there is an across the board losing of faith in institutions, and it's not just the big software companies either. It's losing faith in government. It's losing faith in religion. It's losing faith in virtually every major institution of any kind that has dominated, say, the last 200 years of human life.
Mhm.
They're all losing faith. The faith in all of them is eroding, and people are just becoming more and more disillusioned by all of it. Now, how does that ultimately sort itself out? We could talk about that one for hours, I'm sure,
Yeah, we could.
but I'll give you like one little insight. And now this is coming from the LOA Today side, okay? Because I'm very much into the law of attraction and all that kind of thing. I firmly believe in two pieces of LOA that I think applies here. The first is what we give our attention to, we get more of. And that's kind of what we're going through right now with this whole meltdown process because we have literally hundreds of millions, even billions of people giving a whole bunch of attention to all these things they don't like. They don't like the institutions. They don't like the money. They don't like the way the information is being used. They don't like, I mean, it's like there's a long, long list of all the things that they don't like. And of course, by the theory I believe in, that means you're going to get more of it. So, and that's what we're experiencing kind of. We're getting this, the bigger polarity, there's more and more angst, there's more and more frustrations, and so on and so forth. But eventually, what happens is, and again, this is core to LOA theory, eventually, after you have been so focused on all this stuff you don't like, you finally ask yourself the key question: what do I want instead?
Mhm.
And we're kind of in the very early stages of people asking that question. Not in hundreds of millions yet. I would say it's perhaps in hundreds of thousands, but it's starting to get asked. And that's where the whole corner starts to get turned, in my view, to the point where we start emerging into this brave new world, whatever that looks like, where we have a different way of thinking about institutions, a different way of thinking about data, a different way to think about money, a different way to think about all the things that have dominated our lives for so many years. And to me, that's the fascinating part. That's the fun part. Because as that happens, this is I honestly think that, like, perhaps, I don't know where you actually started. Let's call it the rest of the 2020s and into the 2030s. We're probably going to look back on that 30, 40, 50 years ago. Well, I don't know. You will. I may not be here. But but we're looking back at this period and saying, well, that was the period of creativity. Kind of like the 1920s was the roaring 20s. This would be
Yeah.
the roaring creativity period. And we're going to be amazed at all the creativity that came out of this period, and just how it just changed the world. But here we are living in it, and like, if you lived in the roaring 20s, the roaring 20s weren't all that roaring for most people.
No.
Roaring 20s were actually pretty miserable for most people. But when we look back on it, we say, whoa, a lot of cool stuff happened there. And we're going to see the same thing about this era, I think.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I can agree with you on that one. It's kind of weird because we're really bystanders in the middle of it, and it's
Yeah.
like this is just getting crazy, and I kind of agree with most of what you said there because it's going to be fascinating to watch this evolve.
And be a part of it, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I do think I do think there's a lot of people, especially younger, who are becoming more aware of, and this is just my opinion on the whole thing, but I think they're becoming more aware of, like, not wanting to be how society tells them to be. And this is kind of
Yeah.
that it's kind of a, not a revolution, but it's not a violent one. It's more of like a, no, I'm not going to do it. And even the pandemic for me, it was like, I lost my job and I'm like, I don't want to go back to an office setting. Like, I'm
Yeah.
tired of it.
Yeah.
Like having a kid, all that stuff. It's just, I don't need to work 40 hours a week to be productive. Like, I can be productive. Like, you pay me to be on point and you're paying me for my expertise. Okay, pay me per project and then we'll go forward with it.
Right.
I think that's what a lot of people are doing. They're creative
Yes.
and they're realizing that, like, and this is where I think, though, for me, where Bitcoin becomes more of a reigner, as in, like, it's going to kind of become king in a way. Not,
Okay.
maybe not tomorrow, but, like, I think a lot more people want that freedom where they're not having to use a central point of authority to interchange their money, or being tracked or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Which, let's be honest, you could still track stuff on blockchain. It's, even
Yes.
though it's encrypted, it's pseudo anonymous. Like, if somebody gets your user, I don't want to call it like a username, but you kind of have to think of it like that. Your name is not, like, used there. So, like, that's where I kind of get frustrated with people on the crypto side, where it's like, let's be honest about this. Like,
Well, that was one of the original claims. I mean, I think that's where
yeah,
that comes from. It was one of the very, very original claims that when Bitcoin first came out, everything is anonymous. Your privacy is protected. And as soon as I saw that, I knew it was wrong then, and I knew it was wrong now. And at the time, I tried to explain it to people who I was talking to. I would say to them, "Yeah, I don't think you understand
they,
today." And I knew this back in 2008. Today, with the data that they've collected just so far, they can take any piece of information from you and get the rest of it.
yeah,
They could take your email address and they could track the rest of it. And when I said it to people then, they didn't believe me. Now, of course, everybody believes it because they've seen the evidence of it. But back then, nobody believed it.
I mean, and as soon as you give, like, people don't understand. It's like if I trade Bitcoin with my friend, like,
Hmm.
I have to give him my wallet key in
Yeah,
terms of, like, to
yeah,
to pay me,
right,
and granted, like, you can sit there and shimmy away on an exchange, and, like, if you could keep transferring it to a different address to try to throw people off, but that's where I'm like, it some people don't get it. It's like, that's why fraud doesn't really happen as much as people think, because, and the coins, and Bitcoin's not even one of the big ones that fraud happens with. I think it's Monero or whatever is like the biggest coin that has fraud, and most people don't use it because it's not
hmm,
that good. So it's always that same thing. But going back to, like, this wake up of I don't know. I hate calling it a revolution because I don't know if that's what it is, but, like, I think a lot of people are waking up and smelling the roses and realizing that, like, the system benefits from the youth changing stuff. And we're starting to see that firsthand with this creative, and going back to NFTs and all this stuff. We can all sit here and make fun of it, but there's actual stepstones to where this could be something beneficial for the creative community of some kind. And as a musician artist, like I said before, that's where I think people like to slough it off, and it's like you really can't. You have to pay attention to it because there's obviously something there. And
Mm.
it might be wrapped up in garbage, but underneath that is where there's a stepping stone to another thing. And it's hard to do. Like all of us like to get pinned into a corner and be like, no, this is how I want it to be. And I know, and I'm just as guilty. So anyway, I do think you're right though. Like this is weird living through the 2020s and
It
seeing
is. Yeah.
what's transpiring to be. So
It's weird. It's also fascinating. I'll tell you now. Again, this also comes from having done my show. On the show, on the regular podcast, we have lots of guests that come through. I have a series of co-hosts, and almost every single episode is looking at life from a very positive viewpoint. You do that often enough, and you start to see a lot more positivity out in the culture. So I think most people right now, if you were just to kind of take a poll of the population around the globe, you'd find a very negative mindset, not a whole lot of confidence in what was going on, a lot of disillusionment with institutions, disillusion with, war in the Ukraine and racial issues and political issues. And I mean, it's just like a long, long list. But from where I'm sitting, I'm just seeing like little areas of improvement all over the place. It's like being in spring and you're seeing the first sprouts coming up through the brown soil. Yeah, it's not all green and lush yet, but you can just tell it's coming, and that's the way it seems to me. So, like I said, I have kind of a colored view because I have this show that I do that exposes me to all the most positive, beautiful thoughts and things and feelings and so forth in life. But nevertheless, God, I just see it all over the place, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's exciting to watch. I can't wait to see it just continue to grow.
no, and it could, yeah. There's people all walks of life. I think that's like the same thing. Like people take a small percentage of certain things and they blow it up into this big perspective of some kind. And instead you have to digest it in smaller doses to like see like where there's that good side of things and stuff like that. It's hard to do though. I have not mastered it. So
Well, let's be perfectly honest. We're all in the mastery stage.
yeah,
We're all learning how to be masters. I think we're actually all much more masters than we realize, to be honest. I really think we are.
could be.
Just look at, I mean, it's always hard to measure, but I mean, I can remember, 50 years ago, 60 years ago pretty easily because I'm 65 now. And it's just so easy to see a massive difference in just the way people think. Not anything else, just the way they think.
Yeah.
It's huge, and all in my lifetime so far, and hopefully my lifetime is going to go on for quite some more time.
Yeah.
I'll see even more of it. But wow, I mean, I compare just my life alone to what it was like when I was 5, 10, 15. Completely different, completely different. Everything's different. Everything has shifted. It's not just the technology. It's the way people think, the way they behave, what their approach to life is. How do they think about the stuff that they're doing in their lives? How do they think about their work? How do they think about their families? The whole thing has just shifted in a huge, huge way. So I think that also kind of fuels my viewpoint. Like, whoa, there's cool stuff going on here.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you also see it. I mean, you describe yourself as, I love the term old millennial. That's not one I've heard before. That's kind of cool. But
Yeah.
but as an old millennial or an older millennial, I don't think you're really old, but as an older millennial, you were kind of on the leading edge of millennialism, whatever that meant. And
Yeah.
and so I guess what that means to me is you saw and have seen all of the technical age come during
Yeah.
your lifetime, from your youngest age. You just saw it kind of birth itself.
Yeah, we didn't have computers. Like I remember the Commodore 64 was like the first computer, and
Oh
we
yeah.
had it, and I mean, my older brother knew how to use it. I didn't know how to use. I was like 8, 9, 10 maybe.
Right.
And all I knew was like you put hard floppy disks into it, and that was it. It
Right.
was
Right.
so weird because we didn't. And when we first like we were the internet age of kids, and I remember DSL modems, like
Yeah. Yeah.
Screech
Sure.
and all that stuff. And it's crazy. It is very, and I think that's why for me, it's like seeing crypto. And again, like going back to Web 1, just remembering how slow it moved
Mm.
and all of it, like the old GeoCities websites and all,
Yeah.
like
Sure.
all that stuff. And it's gone. Now we're on these phones that can do
Hmm.
everything. So it's evolving, and I think that's why for me, like with crypto, it's like I'm not for nor against it. It's just trying to take a step back and being like, because as I think that's the other thing, we all want to live in a utopia, in our utopia, and we're
Hmm.
not realizing that like there's no such thing, and there never will be. Like,
Right.
and there's a lot of crypto heads that try to like think this is utopia. It's like this isn't utopia. Like there's downfalls to it, just like there's downfalls to every situation, but you can't tell that to people sometimes because they don't, especially when they're like so hardcore into it.
Yeah.
But I do think this evolves this whole web thing to a different realm, especially with the younger generations. And I've always said my daughter is the greatest teacher I've ever had in my life because watching the world evolve
Hmm.
through her eyes again,
Yeah.
like everything I thought I knew, I'm like, I don't know anything again because
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. I've been saying the same thing for the last 40, 50 years. We have more to learn from kids than from anybody else.
yes, yes, they are more honest. They
Yep.
they 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 look at things in a different viewpoint. It's black or white sometimes. It's crazy, but anyway, yeah. Technology's going away where like I don't know where it's going, and
Hmm.
but I don't want to be left behind in a way where then I'm trying to catch up or whatever. And I think that's why I started the show was like getting questions from people about crypto. And I dove in right when Bitcoin was at about $900.
Hmm.
And I did not buy a lot of it. It was like, what is this thing? I'm just going to try it out. And I first thought like I downloaded a virus. I'm thinking all this stupid stuff, but I kept it, and it slowly grew and it evolved into something. And it's funny that was in 2016, and now most of my good friends all have some semblance of crypto or Bitcoin, um, and but majority of my family and some of my friends don't. So it's one of those where it's like I don't know. To me, it's like I'd rather be holding it and just I don't put. This is the other rule of thumb. I always tell on my show whenever I don't give financial advice, but I
Hmm.
say if you are going to do it, only put in what you are willing to lose because
Yes.
you will lose. And like we saw with this market meltdown, it just, and I hate saying this because I don't like calling people dumb, but there was a lot of dumb people who weren't paying attention and just lost life savings. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, that's a risk that you took on something you probably shouldn't have. So,
Well, it's the speculator mentality. And
yes,
this has been around for generations. This has been around since I think the first documented evidence of it is 1634 with the tulip mania in Holland,
yes.
where there was a massive increase in interest in tulips of all things. And I love the best part. The best part is the highest valued tulip was the one that was traded for 9 hectares of land.
For a tulip. But that's similar, like that stupid first NFT tweet from
Yeah,
the
right.
it's the same. It's just that FOMO, that real FOMO is where a lot of people, and that's the hard part to control. Like I still
Mm,
have people in my family that are like, well, I missed out on. It's like you really didn't. It's just a matter of if you want to do it, like you either do it or you don't, and it's not missing out. It's like you just have to see if you want to do it or not. But that FOMO is what people and there's the people that develop these 18,000 crypto coins that know that there's FOMO, so they're going to put some stupid name on a stupid coin that has no use case to it except it has a dog face that's not even a real coin. I hate explaining that to people because it's
uh,
just like because that's again people think once you're in cryptocurrency that you drink all the Kool-Aid. It's like no, I get that there can be cults with it, but I'm not like it's more or less like there's good stuff to it, just as there's bad stuff. But it's just weeding through that garbage that you have to get through, and that's where technology always goes. Again, like my girlfriend has a vacuum cleaner that goes around. It's one I
like a
forget the
Roomba kind of thing.
yeah, and like I know it collects our data, like it collects data and it sends it back. And she makes
Hmm.
fun of me, which is okay. I appreciate her making fun of me. But it's that same thing where it's like it's always evolving. There's things going with it that we like are so far back. So it's, for me, is, can I keep up with where it's going and changing to? And I think
Mm.
that's important for the youth, at least, to understand, like, they're the ones now leading this charge, I think, in a way. So
There's a piece of this that we're kind of dancing around, but we should touch on it, which is how buying and selling decisions are made. Because you're making the very eloquent argument for making your buying and selling decisions intelligently, and using reason and logic, and not overstretching and so forth. And there's a lot to be said for that. But by the same token, I also know from long years of painful experience that every single buying decision ever made on the face of the planet is emotional. It's rooted in emotion,
yes, it
and
is.
it actually came home in a big way recently when I investigated the thing I talked about at the top of the show. I was looking into this currency traders gig, and it was fascinating because I signed up for the little trial period with her, and she became my coach for. It was supposed to be for a month. It actually lasted about 2 weeks, and before I said no, I'm throwing in the towel on this thing. But from the moment that we had our first meeting, she was saying the goal here is to trade without your emotions. I said, okay, that's a good goal. I like that one. And then she proceeded to show me a bunch of things that were all based on how you felt about something. How you feel about what the indicator is showing you. Do you feel like it's pointing up high enough? It's all feeling based. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute, you
I know
can't
you
have
just
it both
told me.
ways here. It's either going to be that you're going to do it without emotion, or you're going to use emotion as your signal. But when you try to claim the right to make a morph of the two, but you're supposed to separate them. Yeah, that's a great formula for victory right there.
Yep.
Let me tell you that. And in fact, it shows up in the currency market, because I've been I've been investigating the currency market. And 75% of people who invest in the currency market lose money. I mean, there's a warning indicator right there, right? That's why you really do need to have a way to go in there unemotionally, and so you can actually
Yeah.
have a chance of surviving and thriving even. And there are people who thrive. There are people who make millions in the currency market, but they're in the minority because
Yes.
they're among the few who are actually willing to take a very organized and non-emotional approach to the whole thing. But you got
Yeah.
to be consistent about it. If you're not consistent, you're in trouble.
Yeah, consistency is key. And I
Mm.
totally agree with you. You can't say, don't, like, I agree with you, like, don't go in with emotion. Because there was a lot of people that get attached to a Dogecoin, or and they'll listen to Elon Musk, which I don't know why you would listen to Elon Musk. But again, I have on my podcast, I don't criticize people, but, like, I sit there and look, and, like, when someone's speculative of that, you have to be careful. And that's where people get stuck with their emotions. They like a person,
Mm.
they say something, and all of a sudden it becomes like the word of gospel, and you're like, what are you doing? You're doing it strictly because some person. And you're right, when they tell you to do the, like, well, how do you feel about it? Well, you that's counter, that something doesn't make sense. I have a
And yet it's part of our experience. I mean,
right.
I like Elon Musk, not because of all the stuff he does, but because I like Teslas and I like SpaceX. I think those are very cool ventures. It doesn't mean that I'm willing to buy into everything he has to say,
Right.
but I like those aspects of it.
But
So there's where the balance comes in. You got emotional feeling like, I like that part, but on the other hand, how far am I willing to go with that?
Well, but that's because you're critically thinking. Like, you're
Yes,
not
exactly.
doing, like you're seeing a bigger picture of it, which I think that's where a lot of, and I'm only speaking in terms of, I've only ever been in America. I've never went to another country. But in terms of Americans that I know, at least, it's always this. It's never the
Tunnel
bigger,
vision. Yeah.
yeah. And it becomes, well, I like this person, and if they're bad, um, and just as an example, like, we can't ever just like what somebody does, and instead of, we have to like everything they do, or we don't like them at all.
Yeah, it's black and white, right?
Yeah, and that's, for me, with crypto, is the same thing. It's,
Hmm.
there's this grayscale, and that's why, like, I always try to say that to people, is like, because I'm telling you, my family always is like, you drank the Kool-Aid. I'm like, I didn't drink the Kool-Aid, I swear. Like, because they'll ask me.
Tell him you drank the filtered Kool-Aid. That'll
Yeah,
feel
the
better.
filtered Kool-Aid. But you're right. It's like, without investing in stuff with emotion, you cannot have emotion when you're doing this. It's got to be, like, what do you see? Or once it's out, you have to realize it's gone. Like,
Yeah.
that's how I view it. Is like, If I purchase Bitcoin, I'll do it maybe like once a month, maybe once every 2 months when it's down. Once that money's gone, I think of it as gone. I'll transfer it to my hard wallet or my cold wallet, put it in my safe, and it's gone. Like that's it. Um, there's people though who don't do that, and they sit at a computer for 8 hours, 10 hours trying to time these trades, and it's so volatile that like I like, why are you doing that to yourself? Like that is just, and trying. I have a one friend who's been he's very smart, and he does a lot of chart trading, but he doesn't get emotionally invested. So once he puts in a trade with crypto, he just that's doesn't get tied to it. He laughs about it if he loses money, which is how you have to be if you're going to do it as a trading thing. And that's why I don't trade it. It's like it's ridiculous. It's impossible. Like, and like you said, there's people that are successful with it, but they also start with a lot of money. They start with a lot of money to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's like the old joke about how do you become successful in the field of winemaking. How do you make a small fortune in the field of winemaking? You start off with a large fortune.
Yeah, so true though. That's exactly, you know, that's kind of how everything kind of works in, at least in American, capitalism. It's like you got to have capital to somewhat, I mean, sure, you can, like you said, there's a minute few people that do reach that peak, but then we all see that on social media and we think, I'm gonna learn, and they get emotionally invested, and then when they put in all this money and then they lose it all, it's like, well, yeah, that don't get emotionally tied to it. Like you gotta just, once it's gone, it's gone. Like you can't, I don't know.
I discovered this one name that I didn't know before just by investigating the currency field over the last couple of weeks. The guy's name is Larry Williams, and he's pretty big, not just in the currency field, but in investing as a whole, apparently. And he apparently took $10,000 and turned it into $1 million in the course of 1 year, which is a really cool thing to do. But the asterisk that goes along with it is he's the only one who's ever done it.
Yeah.
No one else has ever done it before or since. So it's cool, but you got to take it with a grain of salt. Like, are you ready to replicate it? Well, maybe not.
Yeah. Well, and then not to pick on him because I'm not picking on him, but then they sell a course, and that's how they really make their money after the fact of, hey, I made 10,000 with, I made $1 million with $10,000. Want to hear how I did it? And you get 10,000 people buying it, and that's fine to do. There's nothing wrong with it.
But interestingly enough, he's not the one who would sell that course. It would be somebody else who'd take his idea,
and try to
sell it. Yeah,
and try to sell it.
But he probably had no interest in doing a course like that. He already made his $1 million. Why did he have to have a course like that? It was pointless for him.
No, but you're totally right, and that's what I mean is like it's this chasing of something, and it's like that's the other problem is people. I'm speaking specifically for crypto people, but it seems like they chase something all the time, and it drives me nuts because it's like, what are you like? You're chasing, these gains, and it's like, okay, well, good luck with that. But it's funny because I'll be on a few message boards, and you'll just read stuff, and you're like, I can't read this because these people like they don't see how they're missing a point. Like they're. One day they're up and the next day they're down. It's like, so you basically break even or you're losing money. Anyway.
It's the emotional roller coaster. And that's what it is. They're working on an emotion. The emotion that they're working on is, oh, this is going to be so exciting if I can make this thing work. And then it goes against them. Oh, it didn't work the way I wanted it to. I can't believe this. Well, I must be doing it wrong. So I'm going to go at it another way. Oh, I did it again. And so they're just riding this roller coaster continuously. Yes. I mean, it's a rough way to go, really.
It is a rough way to go. And see, it's funny because as a crypto person, you're probably like, I'm like just as skeptical as you with stuff, but it's mostly though, just like, I do see a bigger picture with it. And I do think that the youth of the generation, the younger generations, the youth are really going to be utilizing this a lot more than we are on the boat with. And I think that's why for me, it's important to stay afloat with this information for people, like especially in my generation, because we're in that middle of like, we were before technology, before like internet technology, and now we're amongst where you're integrating in Web3 AI, artificial intelligence with this blockchain technology, and there's so much stuff coming in, and learning technology, the learning side of so it's all just coming in at one time, and it's like
Yeah.
this is going to get crazy, either good or crazy scary, depending on the route that this goes. So
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll bet you it's going to be both.
yeah,
And I think that the experience is going to be based on what you bring into it. That's again LOA theory once more. But literally, how do you focus your attention? What do you believe in? You know, how do you feel about yourself? What role do you feel for yourself in your local society? By local, I mean your circle of friends, circle of contacts, your influences, and so forth. How is that all going to play out from your perspective? And the answer is going to be a different answer for every single person out there.
that
Some
is
people are going to find like, they're going to be happy, successful, because that's where they tend to focus their attention on. There's going to be a larger segment that's going to have exactly the opposite experience.
yes,
It's the same technology.
yes.
It's all the same technology.
That,
But this has been great. Hey, before we go though, to give people a little idea, first of all, how do they find the Crypto One-on-One show? How do they find out more about you? How do they contact you? How do they find out more of what you do?
sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm on all major streaming platforms, so Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and you could basically search the Crypto One-on-One show, and it'll populate up there. I just released my 24th episode today, and then there's links to like contact me through my show notes and stuff. There's an email address in there. It's the crypto one-on-one show at gmail.com. I also produce other shows, and my main website is thewild1media.com, which if people want to reach out and get a hold of me that way, they can. But yeah, that's predominantly there. Any streaming service, they can find me on there for Pandora. So
And correct me if I'm wrong. When I was learning more about you for the purpose of bringing you onto the show here, I found another show that also calls itself Crypto 101. So how do we distinguish between them? Are you familiar with that one?
yeah, that one, I don't know. I haven't looked too much into it, but I'm the Crypto 101
So
show.
the Crypto 101 is the
Yeah,
key.
the
Okay.
Crypto 101 show. And
Yeah.
I, I, I think I might be, I don't know if I'm ranked more than they are or not. I'm not even
I
sure.
think they're actually ranked higher, but
Yeah.
the point is we want to get them to your show because we already know you. You're the one, you're the good guy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully if they listen to the show, they get good things from it. That's the point of it. It's really not supposed to be opinion based. Like
Hmm.
I really want it to be factual. And I've had a lot of people hit me up for interviews, and it's been one of those where it's like I don't want to sell things on my show because that's not what it's about. And
Hmm.
so it's hard. People don't understand that it's like the people that come to my show want to learn about it. They don't want to be sold, what new so anyway, but people can find me through any of those streaming services, and it's the Crypto 101 show, and they can
I'll,
find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm on all those too.
I'll make sure that we include a link to the show in the show notes too, so
Awesome.
that people can find it easily that way. So if all else fails, look in the show notes, folks. It works. So Joe Rotella, hey, this has been great, guy. Thank you so much for taking the time and having this wonderful conversation. I mean, I love all the different areas of commonality we found. Not expected, but I'm loving it. Really
Yeah,
loving it.
yeah, I'm grateful to be on it, and if you ever want me back on, I will totally come back on to have a talk with you again.
I will take you up on that. I promise you I
Awesome.
will. Yeah, because this is the well, this actually fits in with the overall podcast. So this kind of conversation that we're doing right here is exactly the kind of thing we're doing. It's just in this case we're doing it where cryptocurrency is concerned.
Yeah,
So you fit in beautifully. So yeah, thank you again for taking the time.
you
Really
bet.
do
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much, Walt. I appreciate it.
And thank you to all the new listeners who might be checking us out because they saw it was cryptocurrency. Please join us for regular episodes of LOA Today. You'll see links on how to follow and subscribe in the show notes. And for those of you who are regular listeners, we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.